Alrighty, it's Natty here with Missionaries, Moms, and Mondays, and it's already time for episode 3. I can't believe it, we're cruising. In this episode, we're going to take some time and focus on how we can intentionally take action inside that bottom layer of physiological needs. So in episode 2, we learned about Maslow's and how those needs matter in order for us to handle the emotional stresses. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to unpack that physiological layer and see how unpacking that and intentionally engaging with it actually increases our window of tolerance. The idea here is that we can't take away the stress and the busy of life. We can, however, be intentional and proactive about honoring the needs of our life, including our physical body. So when we recognize that the physical body and the emotions are inseparably connected, we can take some time to be intentional about that physical body and expand our capacity and expand our window of tolerance. Now, most of us have heard the saying, I'm trying to be like Jesus. We even sing songs about this in primary, right? And there's people wearing bracelets with WWJD to remind themselves, what would Jesus do? So we're going to take a lesson from this playbook. We're going to dive right in right here. What did Jesus Christ teach us while he was on the earth about how to expand our window of tolerance? Well, when he began his earthly mission, things got crazy busy, and they got crazy busy fast. In Matthew, we read that after the Sermon on the Mount, multitudes began to follow him. He was constantly being asked to teach, to explain, to heal, to be among an unending amount of people and need. Well, so after that, they get in a ship, and what did Jesus do? Oh, he slept. As a matter of fact, he slept so hard that even when the storm emerged that freaked out his apostles that were actual fishermen, he stayed asleep. Maybe we should take note of how important that was, that even Jesus Christ, in his mortal state, honored the needs of his physical body, and he slept. He worked, and he taught, and he healed, and he took a break from the people and slept. During his ministry, he often fed people after they'd been with him for long periods of time. He fed himself. We read in the Bible that he often, with his disciples, sat at meat or rested and ate. When he visited the people in the American continent, they'd been with him for a long while, and he perceived that they were weak. They'd been there all day without food and drink. So he blessed them, and he commanded them to bring bread and drink, and once they were filled, he continued. The Savior was very aware of the needs of his physical body and our needs. And he knew the importance that to take care of the physical body was critical to actually being able to do and share the work of the gospel. Well, I've now had the opportunity to work with many, many missionaries, and they're not sleeping at night. One elder fell behind on his language learning, and he didn't always know the answers and felt like he couldn't understand what was happening in the conversation, so he'd lay in bed at night, but then his mind would start racing. He'd think, should I even be laying in bed right now? I shouldn't be sleeping right now. There's so much to be done. I got to get up. I got to study more. Now, let's be clear, there's nothing wrong with his desire to be his best, but as we look at Maslow's, where does this fall? His desire and his pursuit were in vision and identity. Problem is, if he sacrifices physiological needs for vision and identity, what's the most likely result? Well, what happens when you don't sleep? How big is your window of tolerance? How well do you handle stress and the busyness of life when you're super tired? Look, there's a reason they added the word tangry to the Urban Dictionary. Tired, angry. Our window of tolerance is this small when we haven't slept. So what I want to do is I want to go a deeper layer inside of Maslow's, and I want to unpack that bottom rung of physiological needs. And let's define what our body's needs are and how this can help us be more aware, more understanding, more proactive with our emotional health as we care for our physical body. So we're going to break down just the physical body's needs inside of this physiological needs layer here of Maslow's hierarchy. And what we're going to do is, much like Maslow's, we're going to put these needs in order because the body also has a priority of needs in order to function and be capable and expand the window of tolerance. So we're going to start here at this bottom layer, and that's going to be sleep. That sleep is going to be foundational. Then we're going to move up to sunlight, then hydration, micronutrients, macronutrients, and then movement. Now, what we're going to do is quickly go through these one at a time, and then we're going to look at what it means and what we can do. Again, it starts with sleep. Sleep is a must. Multiple studies have shown that significant sleep deprivation can impair cognitive and motor functions to a similar degree as alcohol intoxication. Think about this. Without sleep, we can't make decisions. I mean, look at how it works in the hierarchy. Without sleep, we don't make decisions about, can I get out of bed? Can I get outside? What do I eat? What do I do? Where do I move? Where do I go? Can you see how honoring the base layer of need here is actually critical to even honoring the rest of those needs? So what would happen if you asked your missionary, are they getting sleep? Are they getting good sleep? And if not, find out why and get creative with tangible solutions. If they're hot, can we get a small fan to blow directly on them and cool them down? If they're cold, can they sleep in a sweatshirt or a beanie or warm socks or put on an extra blanket? One sister missionary couldn't sleep because of the pillow. It was too big, and it was disrupting her sleep for days. Came up with the idea to cut a small hole in the end, pull out some of the stuffing, and then sew it back up, tape it back up, whatever the tool she had. She slept perfectly fine and started to catch up. The emotions settled. Another sister couldn't sleep due to insects crawling around on the floor. So they purchased a pad that went all around the surrounding of her bed, and it trapped the insects in the pad so that it didn't give them a path to ever get up to her on the bed. Because that created safety for her, all of a sudden she could sleep without being afraid of bugs getting on her. Noise is also common. Find something to block out the noise, whether that's outside noise because it's a busy city or a companion's noise like snoring or breathing or sleep talking. Noise disrupts sleep for people who are unaccustomed to it. Light is also a common problem. City lights, flashing lights shining through the windows of cars, street lamps. Get eye covers, block out light so that they can sleep. Do not underestimate the power of sleep. When there is disruption emotionally, very, very frequently, there is disruption in sleep. Again, how well do you function when you haven't slept? And yet we don't look at sleep and think, oh, sleep's probably the problem here. I feel all these emotions and probably the issue is sleep. We don't look at that because it feels like it's emotional. Again, so much of us is done mental health, physical health. They feel so separate and isolated, and they're not. Your missionary might not be sleeping, and they might not even realize that that is a huge component to why they feel physically or emotionally dysregulated. So sleep is foundational, and next up is sunlight. Now, for a lot of missionaries, this is actually happening pretty naturally. They're out in these areas that are warm. They're walking, biking. Maybe they're in a public transportation mission, but they're walking a lot between their bus stops. However, for many missionaries that have cars, we're finding this to be something that requires some intention. They go from apartment to car, car to appointment, appointment to car, car to appointment, and they don't spend any time outside intentionally capturing any sunlight. Now, if they're not getting any sunlight in their regular day, they can be really intentional. They can do some of their morning study, maybe on their front step, if that's safe, or maybe directly next to a window that's letting in morning light in their apartment. Maybe they can choose to have a 10-minute break between appointments or take a short walk with their companion in a safe area. Maybe they choose to have their lunch outside and take in some sunlight that way. Everyone needs the energy and vitality that's provided by sunlight. It is nature's energizer bunny, and we all need it. And when we haven't had sunlight, have you ever thought of how hard, stressful situations are for you when you haven't been outside? I want you to think about this. Why do they talk about things like seasonal depression? It's because people aren't seeing the sun, and it makes them feel sad and down. They need the energy. We need photonic energy, and it helps us emotionally. So we handle the foundational layer of sleep, then we look at our sunlight. Third rung up, hydration. Now, this one is huge for our missionaries. So many of our missionaries are serving in areas where water is not safe to drink, so they struggle to drink enough water. And then the water they are drinking is so significantly filtered that they're actually missing some of the key minerals that come from water, like calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium. These are electrolytes. I know you've heard of those electrolytes, and they're crucial for actually helping the brain turn on the lights. Now, again, the idea here is helping to expand the window of tolerance. Well, when we look at these missionaries and they're busy with brain work, they're learning new languages, reading, studying, talking all the time, going from place to place. Have you ever noticed how well do you do handling the busy and the chaos and the stress when you've got brain fog? If we want to expand the window of tolerance and give emotional space for stress, for strain, for the new, we need to expand the brain's capacity to function optimally in these moments. Electrolytes are powerful ways to do that. Now, they need to be drinking water, and there's opportunity maybe to send them electrolytes, maybe in a package. They get some electrolytes. They come in stick packs. They come in pill format. These electrolytes could be really, really helpful and really, really powerful for your missionary to help expand that window of tolerance and to help them to feel like they have the capacity to handle the stress and strain of the day. The next rung we come to here are micronutrients. These are your fruits and your veggies. Now, a lot of missionaries feel like they have very little control over their food because so much of what they eat is provided to them by members and friends that have offered to feed them. And we're so grateful for this, and we want it to continue. So where can the fruits and veggies come in? Well, breakfast, lunch, snacks that they take with them in their bag. The first meal of the day is usually always in the control of the missionary. So if they'll use that to get some protein, to get some fruits, to get some veggies, then they can carry a piece of fruit with them in their bag for a snack later in the day, or even some veggies at night for a snack when they get back to their apartment if they're hungry. If they can be really intentional in consuming some fruits and vegetables, those micronutrients will be powerful for them. Now, keep in mind, every area is different. And that's why personal revelation and mindfulness and prayer is important as we look at these things, because you got to remember we need good, better, best here. Some missions don't even have access to fresh produce. Some missions can't afford it even if they did have access to it. So what are some other options? How do we get creative? There are stick products, again, mix-in drinks. There's a product out there that we kind of like called AG1. It's a powdered greens, and I'm sure there's many more like it. I know that there's pill formats of greens. Anything we can do to help our missionary get some micronutrients. I've seen people use dried fruit, VA types of vegetable juices. Good, better, best. Let's bring intention to this and mama levels of creativity to the party, right? We can do the best with what we have. It's not about perfection, it's about intention. Let's make sure our missionaries are getting some micronutrients. After that, the next rung is macronutrients. Now, macros is kind of a buzzword, and most people think of that as proteins, carbs, fats. But for this particular moment, we're just going to focus on proteins. Proteins act as the fundamental building block, and without them, everything else can crumble around it. And it's especially important in the energy department. So again, we're thinking window of tolerance. How well do you handle stress when you're exhausted and worn out? What does your window of tolerance look like when you feel hungry all the time? Again, the Urban Dictionary added the word hangry to their dictionary for a reason. Because what happens to us emotionally when our physical needs aren't met, when we don't have the energy or the resources to function? One more time, we find this as something that missionaries feel is very outside of their control, and we can get creative for taking control. Maybe they're in an area that traditionally doesn't serve a lot of protein for their meals. Maybe they're not getting it in their meals. Well, there's protein powders that can be consumed at breakfast. There's afternoon snacks of hard-boiled eggs or almonds or nuts or other protein sources. The protein doesn't have to come from the meal that was provided for them. It just simply needs to come. So what else could that look like? It could look like jerky, seeds, hard-boiled eggs, peanut butter. They could take snacks in their bag or use the opportunity in the meals they do control, like breakfast and often lunch, to intentionally get their protein in during those two meals. I get a lot of moms that say, okay, well, how do we know if my missionary is getting enough protein? There's a lot of different sources out there that talk about how much is enough. And one of the widely accepted ones just says like 0.6 grams per pound of body weight. So to just give you an idea, a 150-pound missionary would need 90 grams of protein just to sustain themselves. And just to show you how this works, I got to tell you about this one elder I was working with. He was exhausted, and all of the exhaustion was just weighing on him emotionally. And he was like, I've never felt like this before. And as I talked to him, I just said, hey, walk me through what you've eaten in the last few days. Well, I eat 2 eggs and a piece of toast for breakfast. So that's pretty consistent. 2 eggs has 14 grams of protein. He ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch. Again, pretty consistent. 8 grams of protein there. So now we're up to 22 grams. And then he said the meals that members fixed him ranged anywhere from spaghetti to chicken and rice to enchiladas. So we were generous and we gave him 25 grams of protein at dinner. In total, he was getting an average of about 50 grams of protein. Now, guys, this elder was 5'10 and 190 pounds. He wasn't even getting half of what he needed. And as he became aware of that, we made a plan to add some protein to his breakfast, some hard-boiled eggs, some snacks in the afternoon, some things like this. And what happened is within days, he felt so much better. His body stopped hurting. His energy returned. His emotions settled. He finally felt some peace. He was like, what the heck? Your body can't go without the food. Now, a really important word of reminder here, this is not about turning your missionaries into macro counting machines. It's just about awareness. Notice how I didn't ask the elder, how many macros of protein are you consuming? I just said, hey, what are you eating? And then I took that information in. I became aware of the macronutrients, and then I didn't say to him, go count your macros. We just knew that based on the average of what he was eating throughout the day and what his average routine was looking like, we knew what we needed to add. And our focus was on the action. Let's make sure you do this each day. And that's where the change came from. So now that we've got those foundations laid, at the very top, we land on movement. Now, movement is essential. And so many of our missionaries, they're not getting any. It's in the guidelines that they should exercise every morning, but a lot of them, they're turning that into study time, extra time to get ready. Some missions are even using that time for Zoom check-ins and other things. And the missionaries they're not getting exercise. It's huge. Movement is an absolute massive deal for expanding that window of tolerance. Have you ever noticed how little you can tolerate stress when you've been sedentary for a long time? Like sitting all day, laying down, oversleeping, any of that stuff? Oh man, it just disrupts your patience, right? It's because the human body is designed to move. So what can that look like? How can we help our missionaries with this? Well, I was talking to one sister missionary, and she actually really loved working out before her mission, but then her comp refused to leave the apartment, so she stopped exercising because she was like, well, there's nowhere to go running. Well, next thing you know, here come all of her emotions. They're racing all over the place, and she's feeling overwhelmed and sad. And so we created a plan for her to work out right there in her apartment with no equipment, just a couple feet of space and some body weight. Well, within 3 days of starting to do those workouts, she came back. I feel so much better. There's not even words. Within a week, she said she felt like herself again. She's like, I have to make sure I move. I said, yes, thank you. Yes, you do. Think about this. A lot of the missionaries that are out there right now, they were athletes, dancers, cheerleaders, outdoor enthusiasts, or just plain active before they left. So what do you think happens to them when they just stop moving? I've worked with so many issues on this one. I get questions all the time. What if my missionary doesn't like to exercise? No problem. Movement doesn't have to be exercise. It simply needs to be intentional. This is about emotional wellness. It doesn't even have to be about physical health. So what can that look like? They can go for a walk, stretch, breathe, shake out the body, do some yoga. They can move a little bit, a little dance, right? A little tense and release. They just need to move. I get the question, what if my missionary doesn't have any equipment? Body weight movements are more than adequate. We have gotten very creative with paper plates, a wall, and a kitchen chair. This is where your mama intuition and creativity comes in. It's about movement. What if my missionary can't leave the apartment because it's not safe? That's okay. Indoor 2 feet of space workouts are possible. Just need to know that it's possible, and they need to recognize the critical importance of movement. Again, this one just comes up a lot. And a lot of times the missionaries will say to me, Natty, I don't even have enough energy to make it through the day. How in the world do you want me to add a workout? But again, come back to the hierarchy. With them, I start with sleep. Most of the time, if they don't have energy for a workout, what I find out is they're not sleeping well, or they're not eating enough protein, or they're not getting any hydration. When we adjust those things, fascinatingly enough, they have energy and they want to move. Amazing how this works, right? Can you see how essential these needs are? How they expand the window of tolerance? Can you see how in alignment all of this is with God's own creations? He separated light from dark. He made the sun appear. He separated the waters, gave us plants and animals, created man. In D&C 88, we see these needs addressed. Cease to be idle, move. Retire to your bed, sleep, that your body and mind might be invigorated. In October's General Conference, Elder Christofferson said, and I quote, Paul reminds us that we are to glorify God in both body and spirit. Then he continues, nevertheless, I believe it pleases our Creator when we do our best to care for his wonderful gift of a physical body. It would be a mark of rebellion to deface or defile one's body or abuse it, or fail to do what one can to pursue a healthy lifestyle. End quote. Taking time to have conversation with our missionaries about their physical needs being met, and then prayerfully and creatively and intentionally seeking solutions that honor those needs in the order they need to be honored, can completely expand their window of tolerance and dramatically impact their emotional well-being in significant ways. And these are tangible, physical elements. So your first call to action is, as per the usual, check yourself first. Do a self-assessment. Where could you put some focus this week? How are your needs being met? Are you handling your sleep and your hydration? How are your micros and macros and your sunlight? Are you getting some movement? As you do your own personal analysis, try to make movement happen in one of those areas. Be intentional about a 1 degree difference in one of those areas. And then once you've had your own experience, this gives you something to approach your missionary with understanding and compassion, not with judgment, but with pure curiosity. Then, as you're intentional about talking to your missionary and helping them understand the power of caring for their physical self and how impactful it can be on their emotional self, you'll have personal experience. In these moments, be really careful that you don't come across as mom sniffing out the rules or figuring out where the bad behavior is or any broken rules. This is not time for that. This is time to look at what their needs are they being met, and find opportunity inside of whatever circumstance they have to meet those needs and impact their emotional well-being through physical, tangible action. As we approach the conversation with curiosity, with prayer, we can be blessed to see what eye hath not seen before. We can do this, ladies. Moms of Missionaries unite. There are things we can do, and they're real, and they're tangible, and they're pretty simple. They require some creativity, they require some conversation, and they require some intention. And when you bring those things to the table, you can make a significant impact in how your missionary feels out there in the field. You can do this. I'll see you next time.